So to help us understand why financial literacy matters, we're pleased to have Gretchen Morgenson with us today. Gretchen is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. She is assistant business and financial editor and columnist for the New York Times. So with that, welcome, Gretchen.
Well, thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for having me today. I think that, you know, the idea of educating yourself as a college student about finance and money may not sound like a barrel of laughs. It also is something that you probably look at as an additional burden, you know, yet another thing I have to learn in college when you're really under a lot of pressure in all of your classes and don't want to actually have to think about something else that you have to educate yourself about. Another burden you don't need as a busy college student. But I would argue that being financially literate is, in fact, really crucial for your personal and your professional success going forward after college. And I'd like to tell you a few reasons why. I think it's imperative that everyone understand the role that money plays in our lives, in particular, and in society as a whole. First of all, I think you need to grasp how the world of finance works so that you can make sure that you will have enough money you will need to live the life you want to live all the way through from the moment you leave college till your retirement. Now, I think with student loan debt at the $1 billion mark, we are talking about financial literacy that could not be more important. As you may or may not know, student loan debt cannot be expunged in a bankruptcy filing. So if you get into trouble with not able to pay your bills, you can't go to a judge and say, help me erase some of this debt that I incurred going to college. It's unlike any other debt. All of those can be written off in a bankruptcy situation, but not student loan debt. So I think that's one reason why financial literacy is more important than ever. And especially given the high cost that some of these student loans involve, you really, really need to understand how the world of finance works to protect yourself. So the fact is, I think I look at it this way. If you don't take care of your finances, then they can't take care of you. Consider the average savings rate in the United States as an example. Today it stands at 2.7%, even though many financial experts say that it should be 10%. That means we should be setting aside far more for a rainy day, for an unexpected health care expense, for retirement, for our children's education. You're not thinking about that now, but many of us are. We are simply speaking not saving enough. And now we know, of course, that the economy has been in the doldrums. We have not gotten rid of our unemployment problem in this country, and so it's very difficult to save. There are reasons why our savings rate is so low, but nonetheless, it's a reason why we really have to focus on understanding the financial world and its impact on us. Now, here's another sobering data point. The size of the average retirement account in the United States, these are 401ks or IRAs, reached a peak earlier this summer of $81,000. Now, this might sound like a lot of money, and it might sound like a good number, and it's actually higher than it's been. But it is well below what is actually needed to live prosperously in retirement. A rule of thumb, for example, says that if you want to stop working at, say, 55 and enjoy maybe a 20-year retirement, you will need $200,000 of savings for every $1,000 of monthly spending that you do. So to translate this into actual numbers, if you have monthly expenses of about $3,000, you will need $600,000 set aside in your retirement savings. These figures also assume you will earn a considerable 5% on your savings, which is not a given in these low interest rate environments that we have today. So these are some pretty compelling numbers which translate into a good reason to get smart about your financial world. Now, as college students, you might be saying, gosh, retirement is a long way away. I don't need to worry about that now. I need to worry about getting a job when I graduate. That is true, for sure. But I think these figures really indicate how important it is to understand the money game and what you need to do to live a comfortable life. The President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy defines it as, and I quote, the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources effectively for a lifetime of well-being, end quote. But it means much more than just being able to balance your checkbook or comparison shop for a big ticket item like a car. The council also says that it means gaining skills that'll give you a long-term vision and an ability to plan for the future, as well as the discipline to use those skills every day. Now, another reason we need to be particularly alert and on this topic is that in the old days, we didn't need to be as financially astute as we do now. For example, we had others taking up our investments for us in decades ago. We had pensions that were managed by outside investors, professional money managers who knew what they were doing and were paid a relatively nominal sum to oversee our pensions so that we would have a happy retirement. Now, those types of old-style pensions have virtually disappeared. They started to disappear in the 80s. Now they're almost completely gone. And they've been replaced by 401ks and individual retirement accounts. But those accounts we have to manage ourselves. And we are simply not as good at managing money as those professionals were who used to run it for us back in the day. So I think that this really is a sea change, and people have been taking up more and more of their own financial activities because they've had to, but at the same time, the education level has just not kept up. So let's talk beyond retirement. Right now, here are some things that you need to concern yourselves with. Let's learn how banks operate so that you can protect yourself against rip-offs by credit card companies, mortgage lenders, and other loan purveyors. The fact is, financial companies are not and never will be charity organizations. They are there to make money, and they are always going to be looking for ways to bolster their returns by offering high-priced products to unsuspecting or naive consumers. Now, this again is something that has changed in recent years. Decades ago, for example, banks loaned money to customers with the idea that they would pay it back over time. Nowadays, banks make more money on fees that they charge for their services. Some of these onerous, what I call junk fees, canceled check fees, bounced check fees, overdraft charges. Banks have learned how to charge a fee for all of these services, so much so that they end up almost making more money on these fees than they do on the actual lending themselves. Now, how important is financial literacy? Well, I would argue that if we had, as a nation, been more astute about financial matters, the economic crisis that began in 2008 would by no means have been as damaging as it actually was. Had more people understood the nature of the toxic mortgage loans that they were taking on in the mortgage mania the years leading up to the crisis, I believe that we would have had far fewer homeowners facing foreclosure and eviction that we've seen in the past 5 years. The fact is, there were many institutions that peddled predatory loans in the real estate mania. And if we had had an educated public, we would be, I think, experiencing far less problems today because of it. I also would argue that being financially literate will help you in your career. Because as you go out into the world, as you get a job, as you negotiate for salary increases on your job, you really have to understand the value of money vis-a-vis the value of your own work. So you can't operate in a vacuum. These issues are surrounding you. They're assaulting you every day. You really have to know where you stand where finances are concerned. Now, if you feel embarrassed about your level of financial acumen, you needn't be. Studies indicate that college students uniformly show a very sort of weak grasp of basic personal finance matters. For example, an analysis involving 1,500 college students in 14 public and private institutions found little understanding of personal finance basics, including saving, borrowing, insurance, and investments. In this study, students were given a questionnaire on the topics and asked to provide answers, multiple choice answers. As it turned out, they were only able to answer correctly roughly half of the questions. The academics that conducted this study concluded that this low level of knowledge is the result of a systematic lack of personal finance education in college curricula. Most higher education institutions put little emphasis on students' personal finance education, the academics noted, and said that even business schools don't require students to take personal finance courses. Now, given this lack of personal finance education, it's really not surprising that college students aren't up to speed in this area. Now, students on some campuses are leading the charge for financial literacy. Last year, for example, the University of Louisville instituted what it called a financial festival and seminar series. The student government teamed up with the university's financial literacy committee to increase awareness of personal finance issues on campus in a one-day event. Learning activities and prizes, as well as seminars, were offered. And at Old Dominion University, students attend a 5-week program featuring small study groups led by business students and including presentations and exercises on budgeting, credit cards, and student loan debt. Unfortunately, though, programs like these are few and far between. So for most college students, getting educated on these important issues is a job you have to do yourself. Finally, I'd like to wrap up before I take questions with another reason why being informed about financial matters is crucial today. Simply put, you cannot begin to understand what is going on in Washington or around the globe, for that matter, without understanding finance. The intersection of Wall Street and Washington has never been busier. Banks are working overtime to protect their practices and operations from regulation, even as some lawmakers are trying to protect consumers from dubious practices. This tug of war and who ends up winning it will have consequences for all of us for many years to come. The bottom line is we all need to raise our games where finance is concerned. We need to take control of managing our money so that it doesn't manage us. Those are my remarks, prepared remarks, and I'd love to take questions from anyone in the audience.
Thanks, Gretchen. We do have some questions coming in, and for folks who'd like to join the conversation, just type your question into the box provided. So we have a couple of questions on student loan debt. The first is, what factors have caused such a huge increase in student loan debt?
Well, it's the rising cost of college is really super responsible for the huge increase in student loan debt. I also think that many students who might otherwise have gone to college, left college, found a job in recent years, were unable to find jobs because of the high unemployment and the recession that we went through, and so went back to get a further degree and borrowed money to do so. But it is undoubtedly true that the main reason for the huge increase in debt is the massive increase in the cost of college nowadays, both at private institutions and at public colleges.
Thanks, Gretchen. The second question on the same topic, how would you pare down student loan debt short-term and long-term?
How would I pare it down? Well, first of all, it really is, as I said, a factor of the cost of college. And so it's very difficult to see how, if you're in a position where your family just can't afford the $50,000 a year or whatever the number is, then there really aren't a lot of choices beyond borrowing. The problem with these loans is that they have very high interest rates. And the interest rates so far exceed what you can earn, in your bank account, that the spread between those two things is so huge. And so the high interest rate only acts to really compound the problem, increase the loan size over time, particularly if you have trouble paying it back. So paring down student loan debt requires some ability to reduce the cost of college. And I can't begin to know how to do that, but the fact that it's been on such a rapid increase certainly makes you wonder how we might be able to stop that runaway train. I just don't know the answer. I wish I did.
Thanks, Gretchen. Another question coming in, do you have any advice on protecting yourself and your information online?
Very, very important to protect your information online. Obviously never give out your information to people who email you or call you pretending to be, affiliated with a bank or an institution you deal with. Obviously that's a top priority, not to give out that information. When you do buy items on the web, just be sure that you're protecting your privacy. No one can see the numbers that you're inputting. It's very difficult to be completely confident that you will be protected, though, because, as you know, hackers are everywhere, and they're very good at keeping one step ahead of the progress that is made by, companies who offer secure websites. It's obviously a huge problem, but the social media aspect of it might make it a little bit tougher to, protect yourself if you're sort of free with your information in social media. That's another concern.
Great. Another question. Your identity as it pertains to your finances. Can employers run credit checks or require a particular score or record for employment?
Certain industries do, I believe, require credit checks, certainly require information about your background. I know, for instance, if you go into the banking business or Wall Street, they will do a background check on you for any kind of felony or any kind of problem in that regard. But yes, I think that credit checks are a pretty common, pretty uniform way of people checking up on, your responsibility, your, how you manage your finances. And that leads me to a great comment on this. That's a perfectly apt point right on this topic, and that is that since the way you handle your finances is, kind of an open book to your employer going forward, that would be yet another reason why it's really important for you to show that you are responsible and that you understand the serious nature of overseeing and managing your finances appropriately.
Okay, another question again on college costs and student loan. Why do you think the cost of college tuition has skyrocketed so markedly in recent years?
Well, I am not the college reporter, but I have read some very interesting and well-researched and documented articles about the increasing cost of college. And one thing that seems to be pretty clear in a lot of these articles is that the administration of colleges, sort of not the professors, not the, groundskeepers, not the people who clean the dorm, but the administrators, the people who are in the business of maybe promoting the college, selling it, marketing it. These kinds of jobs have really grown markedly. The number of people in administrative positions at some of these particularly large public institutions has really grown dramatically. And so it's probably a factor of the payroll has increased dramatically. The salaries to pay these people have really, really risen. And so you have a larger expense there than you had previously. And, this is all part of the big competition among colleges to attract the best students. And so I believe that that is maybe the number one explanation that has been given by reporters who have done the work and done the analysis to look at the rising costs, that it is that administrative cost, that those salaries that really have contributed to the big increase.
I also read that with endowments down and alumni giving less, that the institutions are relying more on tuition today than they used to.
That's correct.
We have another question. As a student, where would you advise me to invest any savings?
Well, as a student, because you don't have the need to retire, coming down the pike on you right now, the next 5 years, you should probably be a little bit more aggressive. That means that you could maybe buy some stocks that have a very good dividend, very solid companies that pay a high dividend. Not a kind of a flyer. Don't take a flyer with your savings, but companies that are well known, blue chip types of companies, and those that pay a dividend of say 3 or 4%, which is far more than you can get in a bank account. I think that would be a very good idea for a student with some savings to consider.
Great, thank you. And then someone's asking, do you have any examples of how to live more frugally? Maybe talk about Starbucks versus making coffee in your room.
Yeah, living more frugally is something that I think about a lot. I live in New York City. There are thousands of restaurants. I could go out every night, but I go home and have dinner in my home, and I make dinner for my family every night. I think that's a way to save money. Eating out is tremendously expensive. Your reference to the Starbucks is very point well taken. The cost of a Starbucks is between $2 and $3 in New York, and what it would cost you to make a cup of coffee, far, far less. these things might sound like they're small. These things might sound like it's never going to make a dent in actually what you owe as a college student if you have a lot of debt, or might seem like it's a waste of time. But these little small things can add up, particularly if you do it every day. And if you eat out every day, it really gets to be a tremendous expense that you really don't have anything to show for having outlaid that money. So, only your lifestyle and what you do that could be possibly costing you more than you should be paying. And those kinds of small things, I think, are worth looking at and can really add up. But obviously things like taking out a loan to buy something that you want. I mean, as Americans, we're very, very into the consumer mentality, shop till you drop. But I think that what people have begun to understand after the financial crisis is that maybe if we don't need that plasma television, maybe we don't need that brand new car after a couple of years, maybe it's maybe it's a better idea to save our money and put it towards something that will really make us happy. Those things don't really make you happy over the long term.
Thanks, Gretchen. And our last question, knowing what you know now about college, how would you have changed your college experience?
Well, I was very lucky because I went to college back in the dark ages when it didn't cost $50,000 a year. So my family was able to pay for my college tuition. So I did not emerge from college with an enormous bill and an enormous debt load. And that's a good thing because my first job out of college, I was earning $8,000 a year and living in New York City. So you can imagine I didn't have a lot left over with that kind of a salary. So I was very fortunate and very lucky. But what I would say about the college experience is it's extremely unfortunate that everyone has to be so concerned about debt now, because the college experience is that moment in time, a wonderful moment when you really are, it's all about learning and opening your mind to new ideas and questioning your own values and ideas. And it's a shame that we have to think about finances as far as we do, but I think we just have to understand that and move past the unfortunate aspect of it. Take control, be active, be proactive, so that you're not a victim, so that you're someone who can stand up and say, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm whittling down this debt, or I'm managing my finances in an astute manner, and so that you can really be where you want to be and go where you want to go.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. We're out of time, but I think we've learned that it's so important to be aware of your finances, and financial literacy does matter. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.